me a very important guest today, Dr. Vijay Patil, educationist, philanthropist, the president and chancellor of D.Y. Patil University. Thank you, Dr. Patil, for joining me today. How are
My
you today?
pleasure. Yeah, very good. My pleasure. It's a pleasure to be online.
Thank you. Before we started, these last 2 years have been so incredibly crazy for us. Can you tell me a little bit about how it's been for you on like a professional and personal level?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these have been unprecedented circumstances, like that which we've not seen. And educational institutions, unfortunately, bore a brunt and they were impacted hugely. And I remember during the first and the second wave, when physical delivery of educational programs came to a standstill with the pandemic, and so those were extremely challenging times. But I'm really happy now that since the last 6 months or so, that we've students have started coming back to the campuses, and it's coming back to the normal what we've been used to prior to the pandemic. So we can see that happening, and I think the worst is probably over, and we are now quite looking forward to the next part of our journey.
Yeah, and it definitely seems like the pandemic, like the one thing I keep hearing is that it definitely accelerated the adoption of, technology, of digitization, which probably would have taken a long time to happen. And that being said, now that things have opened up, certain parts of that have kind of like gone away. Like certain people definitely prefer coming to campuses and learning. But I mean, there's obviously scope for technology. But in your opinion, what do you think has changed in the education sector that is going to stay, or and what won't change?
So absolutely. So it's not like, of course, it was much before the pandemic that everyone realizes the impact of technology on education, and that was something that educators understood very well. But as you rightly said, that with the pandemic, the use of technology was accelerated, and and we are seeing the impact of it. Even post the pandemic, I feel that there'll be a faster adoption of technology, and it's certainly helped us to be more innovative, more creative in about how we can carry out our teaching learning processes. So post the pandemic, of course, going forward, we see that the next form of teaching would be a hybrid model, which would involve classroom teaching, and that would be complemented by accessing your online resources, that's available on the net. So I think so technology is there to stay, and it's going to reinvent the way and completely change the way we deliver education programs in the future.
And what parts of education do you feel that we need to kind of return to the way it's already been done? Like, for example, you're very much into sports education. Not all that can be done online, right?
Yeah, so whereas one of our core strengths in the education sphere has been healthcare. So healthcare is an area where, of course, you really can't replace it with online education, or educating remotely. Only certain aspects can be taught, but that's something that requires a direct contact between the learners and the educators. So that's something that we expect that would come back. Certain other programs also we faced at a micro level, hospitality management, catering technology. So that's where we feel that the physical being in the brick and mortar buildings and institutions is extremely important. So I think that's going to be that's something that's going to remain. And but as I said, but it will be supplemented by your online learning resources. And I think to me, technology complements your fundamental role of providing education through your brick and mortar institutions. I don't think it can. I don't believe that it can truly replace your brick and mortar traditional universities, because at the end of the day, education is about that human interaction between between individuals. So that's something very important, which is that spirit and qualities of leadership. So those are sort of things that can only be taught in a physical institution. And also, a lot of the learning in education institutions takes place between students when they interact with each other. It's not just about your classroom teaching or your textbooks. It's how they interact with individuals, how they collaborate with individuals. That's how innovation and creativity takes place. You touched upon the topic of sports education. Of course, with everything shut, sports has been impacted deeply. Of course, here I'm not speaking about professional sports because professional sports found a way to, survive. Like you had seen these matches being played in bio bubbles and, with television kind of underwriting the sustainability of these events. So I suppose in some ways, uh, professional sports was able to sustain this downturn. But if you talk about individuals on a day-to-day basis, I think it has deeply impacted sportsmen and all of us, because stadiums, gymnasium, clubs, everything was kind of shut down. So I think it's good that things have begun to revert back, and I think it's the next phase is truly going to be an exciting phase in our lives. I'm absolutely certain about it.
I like your positivity, but I would like to go back. You did talk about healthcare being a major important part of your education thing, but like, could you tell us a little bit about like during this pandemic when things were shut, because it's something that you do need the students to sort of come in. How did you manage that?
So I remember when the first wave hit us. So there was a lot of uncertainty because people were not quite sure about how things would pan out. Protocols were not clear about treating the disease if you happen to be infected by it, and there was serious consequences for a lot of individuals who have suffered immensely. Uh, so initially, of course, students, as was the case, colleges shut down, and students kind of went back to their homes. But the fact that we are a healthcare facility meant that we were part of the essential, one of the essential core institutions, which had to be at the forefront in this fight, because the hospital and the healthcare facilities are a major part of our healthcare institutions. So I think I would say that I'm extremely proud and of the way in which educators, particularly healthcare professionals, responded. I'm saying this in context with my institutions and other institutions also, where doctors, interns, students, they all turned up in the hospital and they were the first line of defense in terms of treating patients who were just streaming into our hospitals during that phase. So, in effect, the nature of the programs which they were pursuing ensured that they were present in the institutions. And of course, they had different responsibilities at that point of time. But so, in a sense, the healthcare institutions were never really closed for a long period of time, like unlike other educational institutions or other programs or non-healthcare programs, because of the fact that they were closely associated with the hospitals which were part of the education setup.
Oh, that makes absolute sense. At this point, I would like to let the attendees know that if you have any questions, you can put it in our Q&A area, and we will try to address them at the last 5-10 minutes of the discussion. But back to you, sir. You know, I would like to also touch upon the NAP 2020 because, obviously when it came in, it made huge waves and it was supposed to be this revolutionary document. But we haven't really seen the implementation of the document the way I think it was intended to. And a lot of
I think
students have sort of like adapted it the way, yeah.
no, I think it's been an extraordinary effort by Government of India to initiate the national education policy, because I think that was the need of the hour. The world is evolving. Changes are happening at a rapid pace. What we see today becomes no longer relevant tomorrow, and India has one of the youngest populations in the world. I mean, I was reading some figures where almost half our population will close to 1 billion. Would be in the age group of about 26 to 29. So I think, given that fact, I think it's imperative for us as a country to make sure that education provides the right framework, skills, and policies which will allow our generation of young people coming out being successful in their lives. And I think the innovations and the suggestions which have come up in the policy have been implemented by different universities, because that's been a mandate by the University Grants Commission as well as all the other authorities. universities on their own have implemented, and I can say this about various state private universities, other deemed universities. So a lot of the recommendations that have been made in the national education policy have been kind of already put into place. And we are quite excited about it because it gives us so much flexibility in terms of internationalization of our curriculums, in terms of flexibility of course programs, in terms of collaboration with different universities, in terms of the research initiatives which we would take, transfer of credits. So I think there are a number of initiatives which have already been put into place. And universities which have that larger vision are going, aggressively pursuing all the recommendations that have been made in the national education policy. And I think that's the way education will evolve in the future.
Can you tell us about some of the steps you have taken with your university from document?
Yeah, so for example, like we've introduced flexible programming, transfer of credits. We've also started, different programs in terms of tying up with various other international universities and institutions. For example, we have, we've established a simulation lab, which is in collaboration with, where we carry out training workshops for our medical simulators, trainers. So with Mayo Clinic, we've also collaborated with, Harvard Business Online for offering their electives in our MBA and BBA programs, which we which we give in our Center of Excellences. Also, we're using a lot of online technology platforms like edX, where programs, course content has been incorporated and embedded into our syllabus and in our curriculum. So there are changes that are happening very rapidly, which we had not seen in the past when we were following a very rigid curriculum, where making even a simple change used to take a lot of time. But we are seeing that there is a lot of effort that's being taken to make sure that these changes are incorporated. There's a very we've taken a very strong initiative in terms of digitization and integrating technology in all aspects of university administrations at all levels. So I think that's something that's been pursued aggressively. And so I think all those things are very important to make sure that our universities remain relevant, that they are in tune with what are the expectations of young people in today's generation and the world which we live in. So I think it's an exciting phase for us as educators, at this point of time.
Oh, definitely. And there's like a lot of emphasis on skilling as well, and this holistic education. And how do you guys kind of manage that? Because I know that, a lot of programs have been very theoretical in the past, and some of them, like, how do you balance skilling and knowledge-based learning at the same time?
So I think, so of course, when it comes to, you briefly touched upon holistic education. So I think if I could just speak a little bit about it. So I think if you look at any human being, there are three facets to a human personality: the mind, the body, and the soul. So I think mind is everything that you kind of acquire, the knowledge that you acquire through textbooks, through great teachers, what's delivered through your content. And we've also, so to that effect, we made sure that, our students, our learners have got access to the best faculty, quality faculty that comes from, different paths, who were at the top of, at the top of the ladder. And then, of course, so that's something that we make a very conscious effort in terms of our recruitment policies. Another area which I feel is extremely important is the body, which I mentioned. And that's where the aspect of physical education comes into place. So I feel that, it's extremely important that you might have all the talent in the world, you might be extremely, bright, but if you're not backed with a sound body and all that creativity, you're not going to be able to, completely, live up to that qualities which you possess. So I think sports and physical education becomes a very important aspect of any educational institution. And that's where we did a very strong emphasis on creating great sports infrastructure, where students can develop their sporting skills. And the spirit is something that's that intangible. That's not something you can, teach through textbooks. And that's only something that you learn when you spend time with your mentors, with students, when you're given tasks which kind of bring out those leadership skills in you, those qualities which are very important to succeed in life. So I think at the university, I think we make a conscious effort to make sure that students have this kind of environment where all these three aspects can flourish. And I think that's something that we want to strengthen as we move forward. As far as skilling is concerned, of course, it's something that's extremely vital. It's and it's quite for me it's quite it's so evident that if we don't retrain ourselves, we don't skill ourselves appropriately, if we would be rendered irrelevant. That's what I keep telling all my educators and teachers, that you got to, this is a changing world. It's an evolving world. What was relevant today may not even be relevant in a, 6 months down the line, a year down the line. So you need to keep upgrading your skills in terms of training programs, in terms of making sure you remain relevant to your surroundings, because the whole complete landscape is changing all around you there. And even the kind of teaching, the manner in which you teach students, because like I always consider, our generation, in a sense, like we are technology dinosaurs, and students are, natives in technology. They've been born
I think
and they've been
everyone
brought up
feels that way. Like
yeah, with a couple
technology is
of
changing so fast.
yeah, I mean, they're using couple of devices, right? My 10-year-old son uses about 3 or 4 devices. So I think it's important that we remain relevant with, what needs to be done. And in terms of, in terms of skilling, what I feel is that that is extremely important. And what's also important is that the nature of economies is going to change moving forward. So, what is it that we all hear that how important artificial intelligence is going to be, cloud computing is going to be, how important content, media, a lot of the communities are speaking about how important the green economy is going to be. So I think these are the areas where the next demand for having that talent force will come. So it's very important that individuals and citizens all, and it's not just restricted to India, it's all across the globe. I mean, it's you would need to, you have a sizable population which might, we have the risk of having a situation where they might be irrelevant in what the future will look like across the globe. So I think skilling will become an extremely important aspect as we move forward.
Yeah, and I think what's changed is essentially having that skilling aspect be more integrated into university and even school and primary education, as opposed to being something that's something that you do after you're out of the education institute. And you mentioned a lot of great points here. I do want to go a little bit back on sports education aspect that you talked about, because I mean, what are some misconceptions people have about sports education? Because you did kind of differentiate between professional sportsmen and then also the education being different. What are some things that people maybe don't understand goes into sports education aside from being on the field and playing and training?
Yeah, so I mean, there are diverse perspectives to sports. So as you rightly said, I mean, we kind of tend to think about the sports as those athletes performing at the highest level, representing your nation at different sports. But there's a whole industry around it. So there's the aspect of sports management, which is something which pertains to the sports industry, which is huge, and that's a career that one can pursue. Then there's also the health aspect of sports, in terms of sports science, exercise science and health. There's a program which we run, which is the exercise science and health program. So that's another aspect if you're inclined more towards the scientific side of exploring sports. Then there are other things like turf management, pitch management. So I've held a lot of interest in creating sports infrastructure. So that's a subject that's very dear to me. So I think that's also an area where expertise can be developed, and there is an opportunity to be had if you have those inclinations. So I think sports, there's so much that one can do in sports in different areas.
No, I mean, it's actually also, I mean, I kind of know that it's there, but then I forget about it. It's not until we have conversations like this that it comes back to the forefront that, yes, there are a lot of opportunities in fields that we think about very like in a sort of one track mind about. You also mentioned about like when we talked about the NAP thing, you talked about, um, economies and you talked about, education globally speaking, international collaborations. Um, how can, and I know that it's a big agenda of ours, to kind of make India like a global destination for education. What do you think we need to do to kind of get that going? How do we make India a global destination for education?
I think that's going to be the next challenge, and I don't see why as you said at the beginning, I'm extremely excited and optimistic about the future. India was a center of learning many centuries ago. Scholars all over the world would visit our ancient universities. So I think those days we can certainly hope to get those days. I think the most important aspect of this journey would be, of course, normally when students join universities, whether it's in India or across the world, I think one of the most important aspect is the quality of teaching. So I think having access to quality faculty, international faculty, is going to be one of the key or quality or faculty of that those standards is going to be extremely important for any university in India to aspire to attract students. And I think it's not just about attracting international students. I think even for domestic students, the choices that students have today in terms of so many quality universities coming across the country. So I think having great faculty is going to be something that's going to be extremely important for you to, at our universities, for India to aspire to be a global educational hub. Second area, which I think is extremely important, is going to be that how we collaborate with different universities. What our learnings are going to be with different universities. Our connections with international universities. Whether it's your research program, your student exchange, your collaborative work that you do with different universities. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be extremely important. Infrastructure is, of course, something that one expects now. In terms of creating the right ambience and creating facilities which inspire educators as well as learners to embark on whatever they choose to pursue. So I think that's going to be extremely important there. And then, of course, research is something that's kind of defines the reputation of any universities. So performing quality research, connecting with communities, I think that's going to be critical for us to establish as an educational hub. And besides all that, of course, the enabling and the supporting support which governments would give would be something that will certainly propel India as a global educational hub in the future.
Absolutely. And don't mind me asking, what do you think, like what aspects do you think India has like to offer that will attract like more students to us? Like what do you think makes Indian education attractive to foreigners?
I think we we are on the cusp of, if not already, that everyone understands India's potential as an economic power. So I think it would make sense for a lot of international students to pursue their education in India and be part of that success story. So I think somewhere the India being a global educational hub would tie up with our aspirations as a nation at in the larger context. And of course, to be a great nation, you need to have a great talent pool. So it's kind of it's interlinked in a sense. So in whatever sector that we wish to grow, I think the fundamental question will be is that how do we completely energize this sector, or where do we provide that talent force which has the requisite skills for India to achieve its vision? So, and I think the answer to all those questions will be from our education systems. So I think everyone would want to be given the right opportunity and the right environment. They would want to be a part of India's success story and India emerging as a superpower. And that's something that I think we've got to work on. And as I said, I'm quite excited. I think this decade and it's a very exciting time to be in the field of education, healthcare, and sports, because I just see that we are on that path where the next decade or so will pretty much define the manner in which we grow in the future.
And before I let you go, I just have two more questions for you. What are your predictions for the future of the education industry? Like, what trends do you see coming up or continuing?
No, in terms of, as I said, I think the new age economy is like, as I said, computing. I mean, we've seen the way how technology has impacted everything that we do. So I think that's something that's going to be fundamental. And as I mentioned a little earlier, that I feel that artificial intelligence, data, green economy, I think that's something that's going to be huge in the future, and rightly so, because everyone's looking at creating a sustainable world. Everyone's looking at the kind of impact that climate change has on the things that we do and how it impacts us in all walks of life. So I think that's something that's going to be quite fundamental, and we will be a knowledge economy. So that's where I think that where our country can truly excel and move forward.
Also, like, as a head of a university yourself, can you tell me a little bit about what kind of programs you have in place or new schemes that you have come up with, or what are things that are in the works?
So, of course, we've been a bit of a traditional university in the sense our core strengths have been healthcare, management, technology. Uh, so those programs, of course. But as we move forward, there have been a lot of changes that have taken place in different programs, the manner in which we deliver these programs, the subjects that we've added. So the programs in public health has been such a post the pandemic, of course, it's been emphasized so much importance of public health. So that's another program which we have launched in terms of what we want to do going ahead. A center of excellence has also been created, which is, if I could just say a few things, that this facility has been designed by Sir Norman Foster, who's one of the leading architects in the world. Incidentally, he's the same architect who designed the Apple headquarters in Cupertino. So benchmarking study was done with numerous international universities across the world, and a world-class facility has been set up at a campus in Navi Mumbai, which will house numerous institutions. So I think that's the way we are looking forward, driving this forward, and with innovation and just understanding the trends of what the future generation and what the future world will look like. It's a prediction. It's something that you've got to look around. I think it's not something, as I said, it's not something that you probably learn anyway. It's like you observe the world around you, see how things are happening. You pick up those nuances and you move forward. And so that's where I feel that the world, that the world will be headed.
Congratulations on your Center of Excellence. And the last question that I like to ask all, educationists to come on our platform is, what is your personal philosophy on education?
I think education is something that should prepare a person for his lifetime. It's about, and to me, education doesn't end with just formal teaching. Like the word for education in Marathi is shikshan. So shikshan in Marathi means learning at every moment. So I think education is a continuous process. It stays with you lifelong, prepares you for life, and it just it's not just about taking care about for yourself and your family, but for making a positive change for people around you. So I think that's the sense of, and being a creative individual. So for me, that's the sense of education.
Thank you, Dr. Patil. I mean, this was a very nice and optimistic kind of conversation. It really made me feel good about the future of education and everything, all the changes, and kind of like this how we're settling down now after the pandemic and things are starting to make sense again. So thank you so much for coming on this platform and speaking with me today. And I hope all our attendees also had a good time. If you want to rewatch this conversation, it'll be available on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And please join us again next week for another conversation on Wednesday Wisdom. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you so much for hosting me. Thank you.